Aztec Emperor Moctezuma bathed in human blood every morning. This wasn't just a ritual. He truly believed in it. But why? When dawn broke over the golden-roofed palace of Tenochtitlan, a scene unimaginable even in modern nightmares would unfold. Aztec Emperor Moctezuma would begin each day with the same ritual, bathing in special pools, prepared with human blood. This was not merely an ordinary cleansing routine. For the emperor, this was the most fundamental expression of the sacred bond with the gods, universal power, and divine authority. At the beginning of the 16th century, the Aztec Empire was one of the world's most advanced and complex civilizations. The city of Tenochtitlan was more populous and magnificent than even the largest European cities of that era. However, behind this splendor lay dark rituals that today's humans would find nearly impossible to comprehend. The emperor's morning baths took place in the most sacred section of the palace. This special chamber was adorned with obsidian stones, covered with gold leaf and decorated with complex hieroglyphic writings. At the center of the room stood a pool, human-sized and crafted with extraordinary attention to detail. This pool was filled not with ordinary water, but with blood carefully collected from selected sacrifices. Every morning at dawn, predetermined sacrifices would be brought from the deep corridors of the palace to this sacred chamber. These individuals were not chosen randomly. Rather, they were carefully selected, typically young, healthy individuals considered valuable in the eyes of the gods according to Aztec beliefs. Their blood was believed to carry the power of the sun god Huitzilopochtli and would renew the emperor's divine energy. The sacrifice ritual was conducted in an extremely organized and systematic manner. Specially trained priests would remove the hearts of the sacrifices with obsidian knives and collect their blood in golden bowls. During this process, the emperor would wait silently, murmuring prayers dedicated to the gods. The moment the blood was poured into the pool, the emperor would enter this sacred liquid and carefully wash his body. For Emperor Moctezuma, this ritual was not merely a religious worship. He absolutely believed that this practice elevated him from the level of mortal humanity and transformed him into a divine being. According to Aztec cosmology, the universe was in constant struggle, and the gods needed human blood to sustain this struggle. The emperor's cleansing with this blood was the most important proof that he was the earthly representative of divine powers. This belief system was based on deep philosophical and religious thoughts that lay at the foundation of Aztec society. The Aztecs believed that for the sun to rise each day, the gods needed nourishment. This nourishment was possible with the most valuable gift, human blood. The emperor's blood baths were a critical element that ensured the continuation of this cosmic cycle. Other noble families and priests living in the palace regarded the emperor's ritual with great respect. For them, this was proof that the emperor was not an ordinary human, but rather a sacred being endowed with divine powers. It was believed that the decisions made by the emperor after his blood baths reflected the will of the gods. After the bath, the emperor would be massaged with sacred oils prepared by special priests and dressed in gold-embroidered garments. Throughout this process, incense fragrances and mystical music sounds coming from every corner of the palace would make the atmosphere even more sacred. The emperor's appearance after these rituals was effective and authoritative enough to deeply affect everyone around him. However, the psychological dimensions underlying these dark traditions were also quite complex. Emperor Moctezuma faced constantly increasing external threats and internal political pressures. Blood baths were a way for him to feel strong and in control under these challenging conditions. The belief in connecting with divine power distanced him from the stresses of daily life. The common people living in the streets of Tenochtitlan were generally unaware of the emperor's rituals. However, the mysterious atmosphere of the palace and the constantly heard sounds of sacrifice ceremonies increased the fear and respect the people felt toward the emperor. The emperor was an unreachable and divine figure in the eyes of the people. The sacrifices used in blood baths were not selected only from the local population. Sometimes war prisoners brought from distant lands Sometimes select youth prepared for special ceremonies were used for this purpose. There was a tradition of dedicating each sacrifice to different gods and offering them for different purposes. This diversity increased the complexity and importance of the ritual. The tools used during the emperor's blood baths were also considered extremely special and sacred. Obsidian knives, golden bowls, jade-decorated pools, and specially woven towels. All of these were items reserved exclusively for this ritual. Each of these tools was considered sacred because it had contact with divine power and was never used for any other purpose. The timing of the ritual was also extremely important. This process, which began every morning at dawn with the sunrise, was planned according to astronomical calculations and the religious calendar. On certain special days, the ritual would last longer and include more sacrifices. These days were typically important religious festivals or pre-war periods. The preparation process for the baths was also quite detailed and complex. Special techniques had been developed to keep the sacrifice's blood at the appropriate temperature, prepare it in specific mixture ratios, and prevent it from spoiling during the ritual. This technical knowledge was taught only to the most trusted priests and passed down through generations. The emperor's behavior after blood baths was also noteworthy. After completing the ritual, the emperor would typically become much more confident, authoritative, and decisive. This change was pronounced and powerful enough to affect everyone around him. The energy he gained from these rituals directly influenced the political and military decisions that lasted throughout the day. The palace architecture was also designed to support these rituals. The room where blood baths were conducted was in the most protected and secret section of the palace. Access to this room was extremely limited, and only the most trusted priests and servants could enter. The room's acoustics were planned to prevent sounds made during the ritual from leaking outside. The social dimension of these horrific traditions was also quite interesting. In Aztec society, human sacrifice was not viewed as a barbaric practice. On the contrary, it was accepted as one of the most sublime and sacred acts. Being a sacrifice was sometimes considered a great honor, and families would take pride in this situation. This perspective was a paradox difficult to understand for the modern mindset. The number of sacrifices used in the emperor's blood baths varied daily. On normal days, a few people were considered sufficient, while on special days this number could rise to dozens or even hundreds. These large-scale rituals were a way to demonstrate the empire's power and divine connection. The medical dimension of the ritual is also an interesting research topic. From a modern scientific perspective, when today's researchers examine the effects of human blood on the body, they have discovered that this is completely harmful. However, the Aztecs believed that blood had special mineral and energy values, and even thought that this strengthened the emperor's health. Emperor Moctezuma's blood bath tradition continued until Spanish conquistadors invaded Tenochtitlan. When the Spanish discovered these rituals, they evaluated them as completely barbaric and satanic practices. This perception played an important role in legitimizing the destruction of Aztec civilization. However, historians today evaluate these rituals from a broader perspective. Blood baths were a natural result of Aztec cosmology and worldview. These practices were completely compatible with their understanding of the universe, conception of gods, and social arrangements. Although they appear barbaric from a modern perspective, they were meaningful and necessary actions within the logic of that era. The psychological effect of the emperor's blood baths was felt not only on himself, but throughout the empire. Knowledge of these rituals increased the respect and fear the people felt toward the emperor, strengthening the power of central authority. Blood was the most powerful symbol of power and divine connection. Today, traces of these rituals are found in the ruins of Tenochtitlan and archaeological excavations. The remains of rooms where blood baths were conducted, traces of special pools, and tools used for ritual purposes are evidence of the existence of these dark traditions. There was a special servant class for preparing blood baths. These individuals were trained from birth to perform this duty. Their responsibilities included selecting sacrifices, collecting blood, cleaning pools, and post-ritual cleanup. These servants held a privileged position within the empire because they were part of divine rituals. The special prayers and spells that Moctezuma used during his blood baths were also quite complex. These prayers were made in the ancient Aztec language and were known only by the highest level priests. Each prayer addressed different gods and requested different powers. Power was requested from the sun god, victory from the war god, and abundance from the fertility god. Different parts of the emperor's body were washed with blood dedicated to different gods. His head was cleansed for the sun god, his chest for the war god, his hands for the fertility god. This detailed process could sometimes last for hours and would test the emperor's physical endurance. However, Moctezuma viewed this process as a way to prove his divine power. The selection criteria for sacrifices used in blood baths were extremely specific. First, physical perfection was sought. No scars, wound marks, or defects were acceptable. The age limit was typically between 16 to 25 because blood from this age group was believed to be the purest and most powerful. Additionally, the sacrifice's social status was also important. Those selected from noble families were considered more valuable. The decoration of the room where the baths were conducted was also an important part of the ritual. The walls were adorned with frescoes of Aztec gods. These frescoes were not merely decorative but also functional, used to summon each god's power into the room. Precious stones on golden chains hanging from the ceiling would refract light during the ritual, creating a mystical atmosphere. The emperor's mental state during blood baths was also quite interesting. Before the ritual, he would apply special meditation techniques, focusing his mind entirely on the divine world. During this process, he sometimes claimed to see visions and communicate directly with the gods. These claims were taken seriously by everyone around him and were recorded. The effect of blood baths on the emperor's physical health was closely monitored by Aztec physicians of that era. Interestingly, these physicians reported that blood baths increased the emperor's energy, made his skin appear younger, and improved his general health condition. Although these claims seem illogical from a modern medical perspective, they were serious observations for that era. The social effect of the ritual was not limited to the palace. The people in the city of Tenochtitlan observed that the emperor made stronger decisions and was more successful against enemies in the days following his blood baths. These observations were important factors that reinforced the social legitimacy of the ritual. Music and dance used in blood baths were also integral parts of the ritual. Different melodies were played for each stage of the ritual, accompanied by special drums, flutes, and maracas. Sometimes ritual dancers would also participate, spinning around the emperor and contributing to the increase of divine energy. Similar rituals were performed in other cities throughout the empire, but none were as comprehensive and complex as those in Tenochtitlan. Local administrators tried to imitate the emperor, but could not achieve the same level of blood supply and ritual complexity. This situation was a factor that reinforced Moctezuma's divine superiority. The economic dimension of blood baths was also noteworthy. The cost of procuring sacrifices, producing special tools, maintaining servants, and post-ritual ceremonies was quite high. These expenses constituted a significant portion of the empire's budget. However, these expenditures were viewed as necessary investments for preserving divine authority. One of the most dramatic moments of the ritual was the process of pouring the sacrifice's blood into the pool. This moment was performed with special ceremonies, and all participants would wait in deep silence. The color change that emerged as the blood mixed with water was interpreted as the activation of divine power. The special breathing techniques that Emperor Moctezuma used during his blood baths were also an important part of the ritual. These techniques were developed to increase the body's blood absorption capacity and maximize divine energy. Deep breathing exercises, meditation, and special positions formed the foundation of these techniques. On days when blood baths were performed, all palace activities were planned according to this ritual. No important decisions were made, no visitors were received, and military operations were postponed. These days were entirely devoted to strengthening the divine connection. The anthropological dimension of the ritual has also become a fascinating subject for modern researchers. Blood baths provide very valuable clues about Aztec society's power relations, social hierarchy, and religious belief systems. These rituals are the key to understanding how a civilization organized itself. The emperor's diet, regime after blood baths was also specially arranged. Foods consumed after the ritual were selected to ensure better processing of blood in the body. This nutrition program was based on Aztec physicians' theories about blood absorption. The psychological preparation process for blood baths was also quite detailed. The emperor would apply a special diet, read specific prayers, and perform mental preparation exercises in the days before the ritual. This preparation process was designed to maximize the ritual's effect. During the Spanish invasion, conquistadors recorded in detail the shock they experienced when they discovered blood bath rituals. These records became important documents that shaped Europe's perception of Aztec civilization. Conquistador reports characterized these rituals as completely satanic and used them to legitimize the destruction of Aztec civilization. Modern archaeological studies have actually found traces of human blood in the remains of rooms where blood baths were conducted. These findings confirm the accuracy of historical records and help us understand the true dimensions of Aztec rituals. The religious philosophical foundations of blood baths constitute one of the most complex subjects of Aztec cosmology. These rituals were considered necessary not only for gaining individual power, but also for preserving universal balance. According to Aztec thought, human blood was an indispensable element for the continuation of the universe. In conclusion, Aztec Emperor Moctezuma's tradition of bathing in human blood was not merely a barbaric practice, but the product of a complex cosmology, deeply ingrained belief system, and sophisticated power structure. Although these rituals seem difficult for modern people to understand, they offer a critical window into understanding the Aztec civilization's worldview and value system. History, even with its darkest details, reveals the diversity and complexity of humanity.